Hi there, Daily Gardeners. Real quick, I just wanted to remind you that this month, the month of April, is the Reviews for Good month over at podchaser.com. And every time you leave a review and then I reply to that review, Podchaser will donate 50 cents to World Central Kitchen. And that's the organization that is providing meals to people fleeing Ukraine. And so far, they've provided over 1 million meals. So great cause. Take a second today, if you have a chance, and leave a review for the Daily Gardener over at podchaser.com. It's so easy to do, and so much good can come from it. Today's episode is brought to you by the Daily Gardener Friday newsletter. You can sign up for the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. Hi there, and welcome to The Daily Gardener, a podcast about garden history and literature. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling, and today is April 12th. Today in garden history, we celebrate the birth of the Czech pharmacist, naturalist, and Jesuit missionary Georg Joseph Kamel, who was born on this day, April 12th, in 1661. Georg was born in Brno. That's the city where Gregor Mendel lived in a monastery and experimented with peas. Well, in 1688, after Georg Kamel graduated from mission school in Vienna, he was sent to the Philippines, which at the time was a Spanish colony. Now, Georg ended up spending the rest of his life there. He once confided in a friend, "There is no physician here, but 4 brothers who know little more than my pair of trousers." Well, Georg also worked as a pharmacist and a botanist at the college in Manila, and it was there that he set up the very first pharmacy in the Philippines, and he ran it according to Austrian standards, high standards indeed. And Georg Joseph Kamel started to notice the way the locals were treating their ailments. And this affected how Georg started to use plants. For instance, he believed that low doses of the St. Ignatius bean, the source of strychnine, had medicinal value since Filipinos used it as a treatment for cholera. But of course, modern research has proved otherwise, and even trace amounts of strychnine can damage the liver and the kidneys. But despite some of these medical missteps, Georg is remembered for his work treating the sick. He treated the poor for free, and he happily received many plants from grateful locals that he then cultivated in his medicinal garden. Well, between his own collecting efforts and the plants that he was receiving as gifts, Georg was able to write the very first flora of the Philippines. And he sent a copy of his flora to his peer and friend John Ray, who in turn included the Philippine flora in his great work, the Historia Plantarum, or the History of Plants. Georg also named a number of plants. In fact, you might get a kick out of this. He named the now ubiquitous ornamental houseplant, the kalanchoe, which was based on the Filipino name for the plant. I just saw some when I was in Hy-Vee earlier today. And here's a little fun piece of garden trivia for you about Georg Joseph Kamel. He was also the first person to describe the tea plant, or the camellia, which is why Carl Linnaeus named the camellia in honor of Georg Joseph Kamel. And if you're wondering how we get camellia from Kamel, well, Linnaeus used Georg's Latinized last name, Camelus, for the genus name Camellia, which translates to helper to the priest, a little nod to Georg's work as a missionary. Georg accomplished much in his very short life. He died young at 45 from an intestinal infection. And today we also remember William Kent, the English artist and designer. He died on this day, April 12th, in 1748. Before William's picturesque approach to landscapes, gardens were formal, following Dutch or French design principles that used a geometric and orderly layout. But William started out as a painter and not a landscape architect. And that meant that when he worked on landscapes, he approached them as a living canvas. William once wrote, "All gardening is landscape painting." And now, knowing his background, that makes sense. In order for William to make art out of the earth, he needed scenery, and he went to great lengths to accomplish his visions. He moved soil to create rolling hills. He used swaths of land for lush lawns, groves of trees for interest and contrast, and paths with benches for the characters or visitors that he envisioned arriving on the scene. William planned for people to walk or ride through his landscapes in the same way that people might dot the landscape of one of his paintings. And William often placed elements in the garden against a green backdrop. That's a garden principle that still lives on today. And so he would put these little elements against a hillside or a group of evergreens so that they could accent the beauty of the piece. Now, much of what William Kent attempted to do has become mainstream. As gardeners, we often have to contend with unattractive areas in the landscape. Think of fences or sheds or utility areas. Well, William Kent faced these same concerns for his beautiful landscapes. And at Rousham, William employed a ha-ha, or a wall sunken into a ditch instead of fencing, to help keep the gardens separate from grazing land. He also improved the exterior of an eyesore, which was an old mill that you could see off in the distance. And what he did is he basically dressed up the exterior with Gothic elements. William also added a folly to look like a ruin. It had 3 arches, and William called it the eye catcher. William wanted visitors at Rousham to look off into the distance toward the eye catcher and then feel the expansiveness of the property. It was William Kent who said, "Garden as though you will live forever." And today we celebrate the birthday of the American author, columnist, and animal lover Gladys Tabor, who was born on this day, April 12th in 1899. Gladys wrote prolifically. She wrote over 50 books that ran the gamut from fiction to cookbooks, children's books to poetry. And she wrote for Ladies' Home Journal and also for Family Circle. Gladys was an enthusiastic gardener. She once wrote, "A garden is evidence of faith. It links us with all the misty figures of the past who also planted and were nourished by the fruits of their planting." Very sweet. Well, before we get to today's book recommendation, I also just wanted to mention really quickly that today is National Licorice Day. So happy National Licorice Day. And in case you're wondering, the botanical name for licorice means sweet root, or in Dutch, the name for licorice means sweet wood. Now, the secret to the flavor of licorice, which, by the way, is 50 times sweeter than sugar, is hidden in the plants that have very, very long roots and rhizomes. And the licorice plant is actually a perennial shrub in the legume or pea family. So don't confuse it with the annual, that trailing, dusky licorice plant that we like to pop in containers in the summer. That's an entirely different plant altogether. But in addition to its culinary uses, licorice has also been used medicinally throughout time. In fact, it's the glycyrrhetinic acid in licorice that causes the body to hold both salt and water. And so throughout history, armies would give licorice to soldiers and their horses when water was in short supply. Licorice is also a fantastic remedy for coughing. In fact, I'm just getting over this terrible cold, and when I was ordering cough drops online, there were so many options for cough drops with licorice. And we know that in ancient times, Hippocrates used licorice to treat cough. Now, licorice is also used for digestion. It helps regulate the activity in your stomach. And in fact, Napoleon used licorice to treat his own tummy troubles. So there you go. Happy National Licorice Day, whether you enjoy it as a sweet treat or as a natural aid to help you feel better. It's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The 5-Minute Garden by Letitia McCloof. This book came out in 2020, and the subtitle is How to Garden in Next to No Time. Well, Letitia is a garden writer, a garden communicator, and a content creator, and she's a very busy mom. In fact, it was her busy lifestyle that actually compelled her to come up with ways to maximize short bursts of time in the garden. Now, before you dismiss her book out of hand and say, well, that can't be done, Letitia's book may actually surprise you. And I think what she's done here is ingenious, because this book is packed with 5-minute ideas, things to do in the garden. And so you can pick and choose at random what you have time to do or what you're interested in doing. Because don't forget that when we garden, we're using discretionary effort. That means effort that we choose to give. And while some of us may not be able to get enough time in the garden, as in we would love to spend every spare minute in the garden, that's just not the case for everyone. I know. But that's just the truth of it. Now, of course, not everything in Letitia's book will apply to your garden because we all have different gardens, but there are plenty of ideas in Letitia's book, plenty of to-dos that may actually spark even more ideas that pertain just to you. And so the bottom line here is that you're going to approach your garden with little bursts of energy every single day. And that's way better than just throwing up your hands and saying, forget about it, because we all know what happens then. Then we're not in the garden at all. And then the garden can get out of control. And so that can become a problem, not only for you and your garden, but potentially also for your neighbors. So I like this 5-minute strategy. It's not overwhelming. It's very, very simple. In fact, the other thing that I like about what Letitia has done here is how she's organized the book. The headings are very helpful. She's used those headings to group tasks together, and the headings pertain to different activities that you might do in your garden. So you'll see headings like spruce up or chop or nurture, or even project. And Letitia herself says that she tends to do one activity from each of those heading areas over the course of a week. And so that's her approach to getting things done in the garden. But Letitia reminds us that the important thing here is just to begin. Just pick one thing at random from the relevant month in the book and then go out and start on that, because at some point your future self will thank you and you'll look back and you'll realize how far you've come in your garden. And that is so true. And come to think about it, that's exactly what I do in the summer with my student gardeners. It's just on a little bit bigger scale. And so essentially what I'm doing is taking Letitia's book and then enlisting the aid of helpers. And so that's how I manage getting things done in my garden. But it really is all about short bursts of time. And that's fantastic with my arthritis. It definitely makes my garden to-do list much easier clear and very manageable. And this is really important this time of year, especially tackling the garden in short bursts, because then when you come back in the house, you still have energy to do all the other things that need to get done in your life. And you don't resent your garden. That's the last thing you want to do. And I know Letitia's book is also a wonderful reminder to all of us about the importance of starting slow, especially this time of year. So I'm going to give you an example. Just this week, I was reading on Twitter posts from gardeners that I know in England who are out gardening because spring has sprung there and the flowers and the spring bulbs are blooming, things are popping up. But these Twitter posts are loaded with gardeners who said, "Oh my gosh, I went out there and I totally overdid it. I can't walk. I can't move." And so now they have to pay the price for that and they have to take it easy for the next couple of days. So this is where Letitia's approach is not only smart, but effective, and it can spare you from potential injury. Or if you're someone who struggles with garden overwhelm and you don't know where to start or what to do, well then Letitia's book just might be the ticket for you. And it's a very sweet little book. I should mention that. The cover is adorable. It's an illustrated cover. It's got all these cute little flowers on it. It's like a little garland. And then there are garden tools like a shovel and a watering can. It's very, very sweet. So I also think that this book would be a great little gift book, really fun. So for instance, if you have a garden club and you're looking for something to give to a new member, well, this book would be perfect for that. So something to keep in mind. Anyway, this book is 232 pages of garden to-dos so that you too can enjoy a 5-minute garden. You can get a copy of The 5-Minute Garden from Letitia McCloof and support the show using the Amazon link in today's show notes for around $10. Great deal. Helpful book. All right, well, we end the show today with a Botanic Spark celebrating the birthday of Claire Elaine Hope Layton, the English-American artist and writer who was born on this day, April 12th in 1898. Now, although Claire was a writer, in fact, both her parents were writers, Claire is actually remembered especially for her wood engravings of rural life. In 1935, she wrote and illustrated a book called Four Hedges, A Gardener's Chronicle. And this book is chock full not only of Claire's beautiful images, but also her experiences creating a garden in the English countryside. And Claire's delightful book is full of little nuggets like this one. She wrote, "It's better to have a few weeds and untidy edges to our flower beds and to enjoy our garden than to allow ourselves to be dominated by it." Sounds like she might have read The 5-Minute Garden, doesn't it? Well, Claire also wrote, "It's a greater act of faith to plant a bulb than to plant a tree." Finally, in her book, Four Hedges, Claire shared a little story about a friend who had just lost her dad. Claire was compassionate and sensitive, and she wrote about the experience in a moving passage that also conveys the therapeutic power of nature. And I thought it would be a wonderful way to end the show today to share this little passage with you from Claire's book, Four Hedges. The massacre of dandelions is a peculiarly satisfying occupation, a harmless and comforting outlet for the destructive element in our natures. It should be available as a safety valve for everybody. Last May, when the dandelions were at their height, we were visited by a friend whose father had just died. She was discordant and hurt, and life to her was unrhythmic. With visible release, she dashed into the orchard to slash at the dandelions. As she destroyed them, her discords were resolved. After 2 days of weed slaughtering, her face was calm. The garden had healed her. Well, that's it for today's show. Just remember that you have a standing invitation to join the free Facebook group for listeners of the show. The next time you're over at Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community, where you'd search for a friend and then request to join. And if you'd like more of The Daily Gardener, you can subscribe to the newsletter over at thedailygardener.org. And don't forget that you can also show your support for the show by using the Buy Me a Coffee link over at the website or in today's show notes. This is Jennifer Ebling. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener. And remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day.